Let's talk to Miriam Levin, though, Director of Participatory, I can't even say it, Participatory Programmes at Demos, which is a think tank. They've called for an independent review of protest legislation, which has been dubbed by the campaigners' Liberty as draconian. This, of course, is the new sort of anti-demo protest laws that have been brought in, and they want the government to review them. Very good morning to you, Miriam. Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, these were all brought in under the last government, weren't they? So, I mean, I haven't really heard from Labour as to what they want to do about them. They've got quite a lot on their hands at the moment, so they haven't quite got to this yet.
That is true. But we think it's really important that you have a review of these laws, because when they came in, they are still in force. The Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act was brought in 2023. The Public Order Act was brought in 2022. And they are really restrictive on protest. And the work we did with members of the public, really talking to them, discussing with them about what they thought about the right to protest, about the ways you need to balance the rights of protesters and the public. They just felt that the right to protest was so fundamental, and a lot of the laws were far too restrictive on protest, and they wanted to see a review of those laws.
Right. I mean, a lot of the reasoning for the laws being brought in was organisations like Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, who had kind of taken protests to a different level. Do you know what I mean? Because rather than just doing what you might call an old-fashioned demonstration where you turn up in a place, or you have a march and you go from point A to point B, or you're standing still in a Trafalgar Square and you're having, you know, some kind of rally, you know, that kind of changed in the last few years with some of these, you know, climate change groups, because they started doing things which the police didn't seem to be able to quite cope with.
Yeah, and when we talk to people about what they felt about kind of different protests, they agree. Like, people definitely find some protests are they cause disruption, and people don't like disruption. But they are really clear that the right to protest is so important that they feel that people should still have the right to go out, be on the streets, make their views heard, and that outweighs the some of the restrictions are far too harsh for people.
I guess it's about finding a balance, isn't it? I mean, I personally have no problem with people protesting, but if you go outside your house and every single day they're sitting on the road, getting in the way of people trying to get from one point to another, and it's going on and on and on repeatedly, it's almost like it ceases to become a demonstration at that point. It's something else. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's, you know, it's a point where they're not just making a point, they're continuing almost to be a nuisance.
And people, and like I say, when we talk to people, yeah, I completely agree. People don't like that nuisance. They don't want to feel like their daily life is restricted because of protest. Yeah. But fundamentally, when we did some polling, 83% of people fundamentally believe that everyone should have the right to protest peacefully and non-violently. And it was that about peaceful and non-violent protest that people are absolutely clear that has to be protected in law.
Right. But, I mean, is it peaceful and non-violent if you stop the M25 and people can't get to hospital, they can't get to school, they can't get to work? Does that then become something different? Because I guess the theory of free speech is great, and the theory of demonstrations is great. And as I say, I've always kind of seen it as something that moves rather than something that's static and something that is constantly there.
Well, it's interesting. We looked at different tactics. We looked at different perspectives on protest that people discussed. And what we found was that people have different views about the right to protest depending on what the protest is actually about. So when we asked people about sort of disruptive protest around cost of living, 52% of people think that was absolutely right. That's a cause that they think is okay to protest about and have disruptive protest about. But say 29% of people said that they don't support transport worker strikes. So it really depends on what people are protesting about.
Right. And what specifically would you say, if there was to be government sort of review of these laws, which laws would you say that are too draconian?
So there's a few actually that came out. So there's a restriction on noisy protest that was in the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act. And when we talked to people, when they really discussed it, they said, well, actually, noise is fundamental to a protest. People have got to get their message across. So curtailing protest on the basis of noise didn't feel right, because protest is all about getting your voice heard, making sure government can hear what people have got to say.
Yeah, as long as they're doing it in a place where the government is.
Yeah, or getting on the media and having their voice heard that way because they're creating protest. Another rule that is in the Public Order Act from 2022 is about being equipped to lock on. So, you can carry, if you were caught carrying equipment that you could use to lock yourself onto something, like a bicycle chain, glue, you can be arrested for that.
Yeah.
And people said, well, but that's going to affect innocent people. And that actually happened. So at Ascot races, some woman was arrested for carrying nail glue to stick her false nails on.
Right.
She got arrested because they said, well, you could be about to unsafe protest.
Well, they could have saved her a few quid. Maybe she didn't put any bets on as a result, but Yeah, but it's a tricky area, isn't it? But it's a fascinating one. Miriam, thanks very much indeed. Miriam Levin there, Director of Participatory Programmes at Demos. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they're asked these kind of questions in surveys, will answer because they're doing a survey. If somebody said, oh, what do you think about noisy protests? They go, oh, yeah, that's all right. Well, what if it's outside your house? Well, that's not all right. So there you see what I mean.